What would you do if your daughter was declared dead, but you saw her finger move inside the coffin? Stay with me, because what this mother discovered changed not only her life, but exposed a terrifying truth hidden inside a hospital. San Juan del Rio. The sky seemed to be crying too. The rain fell softly but steadily, wetting the flowers, the dirt ground, and the eyes of everyone who was there. It wasn't just water that was flowing, it was pain and silence. Marta stood firm on the outside, but on the inside she was broken. Her hands trembled. One held a faded blue umbrella. The other clung to the edge of the coffin. The coffin was white as the face of Camila, her daughter, her 19-year-old girl, so full of life, with so many dreams. And now there she was, cold, still, colorless. With each drop that fell on the umbrella, Marta felt her chest tighten, as if the sound of the rain were time telling her that it was all over, that there was no turning back, that her daughter was really dead. She could hardly remember how it had all happened. It had been so fast, fainting during breakfast, the rush to the hospital, and suddenly that phrase, sudden cardiac arrest, "We're sorry. We're sorry." What a small, weak, soulless word. Whoever says we're sorry doesn't feel what she was feeling, doesn't understand what it's like to see a daughter lying in a coffin without having been able to say goodbye properly. The people around her were crying softly. Some were praying, others were just staring in shock, but no one felt like Marta. No one could feel. She gripped the umbrella handle tightly, her nails digging into the wood. Then she slowly bent down until she was face to face with Camila's face, the face she knew better than her own. Every little spot, every stray hair. She ran her fingers gently across her forehead. "My girl," she whispered with a trembling voice. "Forgive me. I should have taken you earlier. I should have noticed. I should have done more." The pain came out in short sobs. Marta tried to hold back the tears, but they came out anyway, like the rain. "You were always strong, you know," she said softly. "When you fell off your bike and cut your knee, you didn't cry. I was the one who cried because seeing you in pain was worse than anything. And now I'm here, and I can't do anything." She leaned closer, resting her forehead on the edge of the coffin. "You said you wanted to see the sea, that you dreamed of going to college, helping others, that you wanted to dance. I promised I would take you to the sea." Her voice faded, almost inaudible. The rain grew stronger. A distant thunderclap shook the ground, and Marta didn't even blink. She stood there motionless, as if the world had stopped with her. The priest approached and put a hand on her shoulder. She didn't react. He said a few words softly, trying to comfort her, but there was no comfort at that moment. Marta was just emptiness, a hole in her chest, a trapped scream, a love that didn't know where to go. She ran her fingers through her daughter's hair, now stiff from being combed as if that mattered, and then, in an almost automatic gesture, she kissed her icy forehead. "I love you, Camille," he whispered. "I love you so much." The umbrella slipped from her hand and fell to the ground, and the rain now wet everything, even the girl's face, but she no longer felt anything. Marta just wanted it all to be a nightmare, for someone to wake her up, for Camila to open her eyes and say, "Mom, it was just a scare. It wasn't real." Her daughter was dead, and she was alive, but inside she felt as empty as the sky that day. Most people were already beginning to leave, friends, neighbors, some distant relatives, all with their eyes downcast, walking slowly, as if carrying a weight that could not be seen. The priest thanked everyone for coming, closed the prayer book, and left in silence. The gravedigger waited a few meters away with his shovel in his hand and his head bowed, but Marta stayed. She didn't want to leave. She couldn't. Something inside her said it wasn't time yet, not yet. And so, with her face drenched in tears and her hair wet from the drizzle, she approached the coffin again. She stood right in front of it and looked at her daughter with the love that only a mother can have, a love that cannot be explained. She spoke softly, as if talking to someone who was asleep. Camila, my love, I know you can't hear me. Or maybe you can. I don't know, but I need to talk. She paused and took a deep breath. I love you more than anything. I know I didn't always show it. Sometimes I got very angry. I complained, but it was out of fear. Fear of losing you. Fear that you would grow up and leave. Fear of this. Her voice broke. Every word came out slowly, with pain. She leaned with both hands on the edge of the coffin. You were so good, my love. So fair. You always defended the weakest. Always laughing loudly, even when you couldn't. Do you remember when you wanted to donate your hair to children with cancer? You were only 9 years old. 9. And you were the one who taught me what true generosity was. She ran his hand through her hair, now combed with such care as if that would make a difference. Then her fingers moved down her face and neck, and stopped at her hands. Her daughter's hands. The same hands that until recently had held her on the couch, asked for help with homework, caressed her face before bedtime. And there, Marta felt a frown, touched again, how strange, placed her palm on her daughter's hand, squeezed lightly, then touched with the back of her hand, as if taking her temperature. She's hot. She looked around in confusion, as if asking for a second opinion, but everyone had already left. Only the gravedigger further away was watching her out of the corner of his eye. No, this can't be, she murmured. This is all in my head. The pain. I'm crazy. But her heart wouldn't let her go. There was something strange or too real. She didn't know. And then, as if moved by impulse, she grabbed her daughter's hand tightly and looked at her face to face, her face almost touching hers. Camila, my love, if you're there, give me a sign, please. Just one. The silence of the afternoon was broken by distant thunder. The wind blew the flowers around her, and at that moment, the impossible happened. The little finger of her daughter's right hand moved so slightly, so small, but so clear. A small tremor, a real movement. Marta froze, her eyes wide, her chest still. No, it can't be. She looked again, touched again, and screamed. She's alive! My daughter is alive! Marta's scream cut through the air like a strong, desperate bolt of lightning, filled with an impossible mixture of hope and panic. The few people who were still within earshot of her scream turned immediately. The father, who was storing his things under a tarp, dropped everything and ran toward her. The funeral home nurse, who until then had kept a respectful distance, approached with long strides and a tense face. "Ma'am, please," said the priest, trying to touch her shoulder. "I understand your pain, but no, I didn't see her. I swear by all that is sacred." She moved her finger, the finger of her right hand. Marta's eyes were wide open. She was breathing with difficulty, and she was still holding her daughter's hands tightly inside the coffin. She's warm. She's not dead, Father. She's alive." The young nurse, with a look on his face as if he had never experienced anything like this before, shook his head slowly. "That's not possible. It could have been a spasm, something natural after death." "A spasm, my ass!" Marta shouted again, her eyes now fixed on him. "Are you going to tell me I don't know when a finger moves? I saw it, damn it, I saw it." The father tried to approach her once more. "Marta, pain can confuse the mind. The body sometimes reacts in ways that... Father, for God's sake, she's alive." Tears ran down her face and mixed with the rain. "Listen to what I'm saying. It's not crazy." It was then that the gravedigger, who until then had been watching from a distance, dropped his shovel on the ground and walked slowly toward them. The plastic cape he was wearing moved in the wind. He looked at everyone seriously and spoke. "I saw it too. The finger moved. I was watching when it happened. I thought it was my imagination, but now I'm sure it moved." Silence fell over the cemetery. The nurse's eyes widened. The priest covered his mouth with his hand. Marta stood up suddenly, as if the gravedigger's confirmation was proof that she wasn't crazy. I told you. I told you," she repeated between sobs. "We need medical help now," said the gravedigger. The nurse took his cell phone out of his pocket and called. His voice trembled as he spoke to emergency services. "I'm calling from the San Juan del Rio Cemetery. We have an urgent situation. A body may be alive. Yes, I repeat, it may be alive." Minutes later, a patrol car arrived first. 2 officers got out, surprised by what they had been told. One of them, the older one, asked that no one touch the body anymore. "We're going to take her out carefully and take her to the hospital." Marta approached the police officers with red eyes and hands still trembling. "Please take care of her. Take care of my daughter," she said, almost without a voice. For the first time, one of the officers looked at her with respect and humanity. "We will, I promise you." As they placed the coffin in the makeshift ambulance, Marta stood beside it with her hands clasped as if in prayer. The priest remained silent. The gravedigger knelt and took off his hat. The sky was still gray and seemed frozen in time, and deep in Marta's soul, a small flame began to light up again, because even in the midst of the darkest pain, something was saying, maybe, just maybe, it's not the end yet. In the cold hospital room, the silence was almost total. All that could be heard was the faint hum of a machine connected to the wall and the sound of raindrops on the window. Camila was lying there on a pale stretcher, motionless, still wearing the same white dress she had worn at the wake, her feet bare, her hands on her chest. She seemed to be sleeping, or something worse. Dr. Lucia Reyes entered with firm steps. She was wearing a clean gown, glasses, and a serious, almost cold expression. She was known for being practical and technical, and for not letting her emotions influence her. She took the file, looked at Camila's chart, and shook her head. She was brought back from the cemetery. She muttered, as if doubting what she was reading, a possible involuntary movement, a suspected error. She closed the file and turned to the nurses. "Let's get this over with. Do the tests." Marta, sitting on a bench in the corner, watched everything with sunken eyes full of fear and hope mixed together. She got up slowly. "Doctor, she's alive. I saw her. Her finger moved. She's warm. Please listen to me." Lucia did not respond immediately. She went to Camila, put on her stethoscope, and placed it on the girl's chest. She moved her eyes from side to side, as if searching for something. She pressed carefully on her neck, then her wrists, then shone a small flashlight in her eyes. Nothing. No heartbeat, no pupil reflex, no neurological response. She said aloud, as if dictating, "Post-mortem spasms are common. They do not indicate life." Marta approached, crying, "I don't see it. Look, doctor, she's not dead. She's here. She's just asleep. Maybe. I don't know. But she's here." Lucia sighed, took off her glasses, and rubbed her eyes wearily. "I understand your pain, ma'am, but what you saw may have been your imagination. It's grief. The body has reflexes." "That doesn't mean it wasn't my imagination," Marta shouted. "It was real. The gravedigger saw it, and I saw it. I'm not crazy." There was a tense silence. The nurses looked at each other. One seemed to hesitate. Lucia examined the girl's face more closely, and it was at that moment that something happened. A small, timid tear rolled down the corner of Camila's right eye. Lucia froze, leaned closer, took a tissue, touched the tear, and looked at it. It was wet. This isn't possible," Marta murmured. She saw it and ran to her daughter's side, falling to her knees. "Camila, my girl, you're there, right?" she whispered, her forehead resting on the girl's hand. "Mommy's here. I'm here, my love. Stay with me, please." Lucia took 2 steps back, not understanding. Her face, which had been so firm before, now showed something new, doubt and fear. "This isn't a reflection," Marta said softly. She squeezed her daughter's hand lovingly, with faith. "You heard it, right, Camila? You felt it. You're fighting, and I'm with you until the end. I swear." Lucia stood still, not knowing what to do. Perhaps for the first time in her entire career, she was unsure of anything. Everything she knew, everything she had learned now seemed small in the face of that tear. And there, in that cold room, between science and the impossible, a new hope was born, silent, but alive, very alive. The sound of footsteps in the hallway sounded like a drum, firm and hurried. The neurologist entered the room with his gown still open, his face serious, and her eyes went straight to the stretcher. He didn't greet anyone. She didn't smile. She went straight to the point. "What do we have here?" she asked. Already putting on his gloves, Dr. Lucia, still nervous from what she had seen, replied with a trembling voice, "A 19-year-old girl declared dead from cardiac arrest. They brought her back from the cemetery. Her mother said she saw an involuntary movement. I myself saw a tear. We did a preliminary exam. No response. The neurologist said nothing. He just came over, checked her pupils, tested her reflexes by tapping her knee and arm. He measured her minimal, almost invisible breathing, then turned to the nurses. CT scan now, and a complete electroencephalogram. Quickly." Marta, who was sitting in a corner, got up with difficulty. She was exhausted, but full of hope. "Doctor, my daughter is alive, isn't she? I'm not crazy. She's in there listening. I know it." He paused, looked at Marta for a second, and said calmly, "We'll find out. But what you saw was not your imagination." Hours passed, long, silent hours. Every minute seemed like an eternity until he returned with the test results in his hand, his face serious. But now there was something in his eyes, surprise, quiet amazement, and an uncomfortable certainty. He put the papers on the table, opened them, showed the results to the team, and spoke. Catalepsy. Silence. He wiped his glasses, ran his hand through his hair, and continued. Severe catalepsy is a very rare condition. The body enters a state of deep coma with almost no apparent activity, weak pulse, minimal breathing, no response to stimuli. It can last for hours, days, and yes, it looks like death. No one moved. She's alive, in a coma, but alive. Lucia closed her eyes for a second, swallowed, covered her mouth with her hand, as if trying to contain her guilt. "My God," she murmured. "We almost buried her alive." Marta fell to her knees, her eyes filled with tears, her hand on her chest. "I knew it. I knew it. My daughter is alive. I felt it." The neurologist nodded. "You saved her life, Mrs. Marta. If it weren't for your insistence, we would have committed an irreversible tragedy." The room fell silent, each person processing the news in their own way. Lucia stood motionless, guilt on her face. Marta approached her daughter, who was still lying down, and whispered softly, "You fought, my girl, and now it's our turn to fight for you until the end." And there, among machines and tears, a new opportunity was born, a new story, and a miracle that almost no one believed possible until that moment. Lucia stood in the hallway for a few minutes, alone. The sound of footsteps coming and going through the hospital did not bring her out of her trance. She stared at the floor, her gown half open, her badge hanging, her hands trembling slightly. She was pale, as if she had seen a ghost, or worse, as if she had seen herself from the outside and didn't like what she saw. She entered the doctor's break room, closed the door, rested her forehead against the cold wall, and took a deep breath, but her breathing was short and shaky. She sat down on a chair, rested her elbows on her knees, and held her head in her hands, murmuring to herself, "We didn't check. They didn't repeat the test. We released the body without repeating it, without being sure. The hospital made a big mistake." Another doctor entered. It was Dr. Javier, a colleague on duty. He saw how she was and approached her. "Everything's fine, Lucia. She didn't answer right away. Then she looked up with tears in her eyes and spoke almost in a whisper. "We were going to bury her alive, Javier. A 19-year-old girl alive." He approached her, sat down next to her, and tried to calm her down. No one could have known. There was no way. Yes, there was. Yes, her voice was stronger now. "I knew that everything was happening very quickly. I saw the file. They didn't do all the tests. They didn't wait for the full report. They told me to release her, and I didn't say anything. I accepted it as if she were just another body. It was a mistake of the system, the pressure for beds, the lack of resources, the rush. It was our mistake. And if her mother hadn't insisted, if she hadn't shouted at the cemetery, we would have killed a girl with our own hands." She remained silent, wiping her tears forcefully, trying to hide the pain, but she couldn't. Outside the room, Marta was walking down the hallway to get a glass of water when she heard everything. She stopped, stood there motionless, listening to every word. She didn't want to, but she heard it. It was a mistake. "A mistake that almost cost a girl her life," said Lucia. Marta put her hand to her chest. The world spun around her for a second. She had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. Later, sitting in the chair next to Camila's bed, with the dim light of night coming in through the window, Marta opened the folder with the hospital papers. She wanted to understand. She needed to understand. She took the death certificate and read it once, twice, 3 times. At the bottom was the name Dr. Roman Ortega. She frowned. She didn't know that name. He wasn't among the doctors who had treated Camila during her stay. He did not appear in the hospital records. It was as if he had only appeared to sign and then disappeared. "Who are you?" she murmured softly. The doubt remained deep inside, in the heart of a mother. When something doesn't add up, it's because there's something else behind it. Marta closed the folder carefully and looked at her daughter, and whispered, "I'm going to find out what they did to you, my love. No one will go unpunished. I swear." It was already late in the morning. The lights in the ICU were almost all off, with only a few flickering at the end of the hallway. The air was cold and dry, and the sound of the machines was the only thing breaking the silence, that constant beeping like a whisper of life. Marta was sitting there in the same chair she had been sitting in since the beginning, one of those hard plastic ones that hurt your back. But she didn't care. She couldn't even feel her body anymore. She just wanted to be close. In her right hand, she held Camila's, squeezing it gently from time to time. Sometimes she spoke. Sometimes she just stayed quiet, looking at her daughter. "Do you remember that day in the park?" she asked softly. "We fell hard on the wet grass, and you laughed so hard you couldn't even get up. I got angry, remember? I pretended to be angry, but inside I was laughing with you." She sighed deeply, ran her hand through her daughter's hair, and adjusted the blanket. "I know you're there. I know. And I also know you're tired. But if you can, just one more sign. Anything. I'm here. Yes, I didn't leave. I'm not going to leave." She talked for hours, telling stories about her childhood, her birthdays, the first bicycle, the time Camila made dulce de leche and burned the pot. She told everything like someone who plants memories in soil that seems dry but still has roots. Time passed slowly. Marta, with red and swollen eyes, no longer knew if it was day or night. She rested her head next to her daughter's, trying to rest without letting go of her hand. Sleep came little by little, her eyes heavy, her body giving in, but her heart always awake. And then suddenly, a slight squeeze, small, almost imperceptible. Marta opened her eyes immediately and looked at the hand holding the finger, the same finger that had moved in the coffin. It moved again. Camila whispered with a broken voice, "It was you." She looked at her daughter. Her face was still calm, expressionless, but the finger, now she was sure, had life in it. Marta brought her other hand to her mouth, trying not to cry. The emotion came like a strong, hot, intense wind. "You're listening to me, right, my love? You're trying to come back." She rested her forehead on her daughter's hand and began to cry silently, the beautiful cry of someone who has not lost faith, who endured more than she could bear, but did not give up. There, in that cold room, two souls touched each other, one trying to return, the other holding on with all her strength so as not to let her go. That night, the hospital seemed quieter than ever, as if the air seemed to stand still. Marta was exhausted, but her eyes were wide open, her cell phone in her hand. She had an idea, one last gesture, a glimmer of hope. She moved away from the bed a little, leaned against the cold wall, and opened the recording app on her cell phone. She brought the device close to her mouth and began to speak in a soft voice, but one full of feeling. "Hello, my daughter. It's me, your mom. I know you're there, listening to everything, even though you're silent. And I wanted to remind you of a few things, just so you know that I'm here, and that you're not alone." She paused, took a deep breath, and continued. "Do you remember the first time you sang at school? You were shaking like a leaf in the wind, but you still went up on stage and sang, with that little voice. Out of tune, but so beautiful, so yours. I cried so much, Camila. I cried with pride because that's when I saw who you were. Brave." She smiled to herself, her eyes filled with tears. "And that day, you told me you wanted to be a doctor, that you wanted to take care of people, that you said no one should die alone. You were only 12 years old, my girl, and you already had more heart than many adults." Her voice began to tremble. The cell phone almost fell from her hand. "I love you, Camila, and I'm here holding your hand, counting the seconds with you. If you want to come back, I'm here, and if you can't, I'll understand. But if you have any strength in there, give me a sign, my love, any sign." Marta stopped the recording, put it on endless repeat, and placed the cell phone very close to her daughter's ear. The room fell completely silent. She held her breath, her eyes fixed on the heart monitor for a few seconds. Nothing. And then, suddenly, a slight increase. The line on the monitor rose a little, but it rose. Marta put her hand to her mouth, her eyes wide open, emotion exploding in her chest. "Camila, the doctor!" Lucia entered just then. She stopped when she saw the monitor and approached slowly, observing the signs. She saw the cell phone still there, repeating the mother's voice, and her eyes filled with tears. "She's reacting," she whispered, almost unable to believe it. Marta turned around, her face covered in tears. I told you she was listening. She heard." Lucia touched her shoulder gently, and their eyes met for the first time. They were on the same side, not as doctor and mother, but as two women trying to save a life. There, in that tiny sound, in that almost invisible beep, was the greatest proof of all. Love reaches where nothing else can. Marta couldn't sleep, no matter how tired she was, exhausted, her body worn out after so many days in the hospital. Her head wouldn't stop. Something inside her insisted, pressing on that doubt that wouldn't go away. The name on the certificate, Dr. Roman Ortega. She had never heard that name in the hallways. No doctor introduced himself as him. No gown had that name on it. And yet it was he who signed the paper that said her daughter was dead. In the empty waiting room, with a cold coffee in her hand, Marta opened her cell phone and began to search. She typed carefully, as if she didn't want to find what she already suspected. She searched medical websites, public records, anything, and found first a small note in an old newspaper that said, "Doctor suspended for irregularities in death certificates. Roman Ortega loses his license after investigations point to serial falsification of hospital documents." Marta's heart skipped a beat. She continued reading each paragraph, finding it harder and harder to swallow. That man had been investigated for signing certificates without examinations, hastily declaring deaths, especially of patients without close family or health insurance. Many cases were filed away, many forgotten. She looked again at the name on the document of her daughter. Same name, same stamp. How? She murmured in a low voice. How is he signing a certificate? He can't do that anymore. He had already been suspended. Her hand trembled. Her mouth went dry. Reality began to weigh down on her with a heaviness she didn't want to feel. Roman Ortega shouldn't even be there, and yet he was. She slowly turned off her cell phone and stood there quietly, staring into space. The noise of the soda machine in the background sounded distant. Her head was now filled with questions. What was that man doing inside the hospital? Who allowed it? And how many others like Camila could be victims? Marta squeezed her eyes shut, feeling her throat close up. A new fear was born inside her. It was no longer the fear of losing her daughter. It was the fear of discovering that behind the mistake, there was something much bigger and much dirtier than she had imagined that morning. The hospital was still slowly waking up. The hallways were empty, cleaning carts squeaking on the floor, sunlight timidly entering through the tall windows. Marta was at the reception desk getting a watered-down coffee from the machine when the security guard approached her, a man with a soft, friendly voice. "Mrs. Marta," he said. She turned around, surprised. "Yes," she said. "They left this for you," he said, handing her a brown envelope with no return address. She took the envelope carefully. It was light, but firm. There was something inside. Her heart began to beat faster. She returned to the bench by the wall, sat down, and opened it slowly. Inside were folded papers and a sheet of paper written in shaky handwriting. First, she read the letter. "Your daughter is not the first, nor will she be the last. Don't stay silent. Don't stop searching. No, they will try to make you give up." Her fingers grew cold. She opened the papers. There were copies of death certificates, all similar, all with Roman Ortega's stamp, different dates, different patients, but the same pattern. Deaths declared due to sudden cardiac arrest, no tests, no autopsy, no protocol. Marta felt her breath fail her. Her stomach turned. It was as if the ground had disappeared from under her feet. She folded the papers calmly, as if they were pieces of a dirty, cruel puzzle. She put everything in her bag, got up, and went straight to her daughter's room. Dr. Lucia was inside making notes when she saw Marta enter with that look. She froze. Marta closed the door. "You told me it was a mistake. But this..." She took the envelope out of her bag with a steady hand. "This is a crime." Lucia didn't answer. She remained silent for a few seconds, then let go of the chart. "I started..." She swallowed. "I received the order. They told me to release the body quickly. They said she was homeless and had no health insurance, that she was taking up too much space, and you obeyed." Marta's voice was low but heavy. Lucia closed her eyes, overcome with shame. "I was tired. I was overwhelmed. I gave in. I thought it was just another case, but it wasn't. It was your daughter. It was a life, and I failed." Marta approached slowly, her gaze steady, tears in her eyes. She wasn't homeless. She had a home. She had dreams. She had people who loved her. And even if she didn't have any of that, my daughter is not trash. Lucia lowered her head, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry," she murmured, repeating herself. Marta turned around, went to Camila's bed, took her daughter's hand, and squeezed it slowly. And there, with the envelope in her lap, her heart beating fast, and the truth beginning to hurt in a new way, Marta felt a strength arise within her. A strength she didn't know she had, because now she knew she had to see this through, or to the end, and it was no longer just for her daughter. It was for all those who had been silenced before. It was dawn again. Marta already knew all the sounds of the hospital at that hour. The noise of the ice machine, the soft footsteps of the night nurses, the low beeping of the old elevator. But that day, she wasn't just sitting next to her daughter. She was walking around with the envelope in her hands. She went down to the basement where the document area was. She knew she couldn't be there, but her fear had long since turned to courage. That's when she saw Anna, the cleaning lady, a small woman with kind eyes, and the face of someone who had carried a heavy burden in life. Doña Marta, I'm lost here. I'm trying to understand what they did to my daughter. Did you see anything? Do you know anything? Anna looked down the empty hallway, took a deep breath, then nodded. The two walked silently down a narrow hallway and entered a forgotten room filled with old files and closed cabinets. A forgotten room full of old files and locked cabinets. Anna took a key hidden inside a cleaning product bottle and opened one of the metal drawers. From there, she took out a red folder, worn by time. This fell on the floor the other day when they were moving the shelves. They told me to throw it away, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Marta opened it. There were sheets of paper with dates, names, ages, cause of death, cardiac arrest, sudden respiratory failure, and next to it a note saying, "Exams incomplete." Almost all the victims were children, Marta said, her voice trembling. This is a list of murders. Anna just nodded, her eyes filled with tears. Marta took the folder and spent the next few days investigating, calling, looking for families. That's how she found Felipe. He opened the door with sad, tired eyes. "I'm Marta. They almost buried my daughter alive, and I think your story has to do with that." Felipe swallowed hard and took a while to speak. "My daughter died 2 years ago. They said it was sudden death, but they wouldn't let me see the body. They said it was already prepared, and that it was better not to move anything. Everything happened very quickly, too quickly. I never ever believed that." He showed her a photo. It was a girl with curly hair, laughing with her mouth all dirty from ice cream. She was only 8 years old. She was my life. Marta squeezed his hand. They felt the same, the pain of someone who almost lost everything, the rage of someone who didn't have a chance to fight. That same week, a young nurse who had seen Marta in the hallways approached her. "Can I talk to you?" They went to a secluded corner near the emergency exit. He was trembling, looking from side to side. "I'm tired of hiding, of pretending I don't know. I saw things, ugly things. People taken away before their tests. People still alive with a pulse. And yet they put them in the morgue, and you never said anything. I was new. I was scared. They told me to keep quiet, that it was better that way, that no one was going to complain about these people, that everything was fine. But it wasn't fine, ma'am. It wasn't fine. It was very bad." He started to cry right there, crying out of guilt, out of regret. "There are dirty things there, ma'am. Very ugly things." Marta lowered her head and closed her eyes tightly. She felt she had touched on something dangerous, but now she wasn't going to stop, because what they were doing was killing people in silence, and she no longer accepted silence. The phone rang in the middle of the night. It was an unknown number. Marta was tired and almost didn't answer, but something inside her made her press the green button. On the other end, there was silence for a few seconds. Then a deep, cold voice, without any urgency, said, "Stop doing this, or your daughter will be next." Really. And the call ended. Marta stood still with the phone pressed to her ear, feeling her body freeze, her heart beating in her neck, her legs trembling. She sat down or fell. She wasn't sure. She stayed there trying to understand what she had just heard. Then she took a deep breath, grabbed her cell phone again, and went to the call recorder. Luckily, the app was activated, and the voice was recorded. The next day, she didn't think twice. She printed the list of MU. She grabbed the false reports, the anonymous envelope, the recording, and went straight to a television station. She waited in the reception area for hours. No one wanted to see her until a curious young producer heard her story and asked to see the documents. 10 minutes later, Marta was in front of a camera, nervous, with teary eyes and a trembling voice. "They were going to bury my daughter alive, and it wasn't just her. There are more. There's a list. There are names. Children. People who didn't have a chance. They threatened me, but I'm not going to be silent, because now I'm not alone. That same day, the report aired on television. The video went viral on social media. Thousands of shares, comments, outraged people, mothers saying, "My God, that could have been my child." The hashtag Camila está viva, Camila is alive, became the symbol of a cry held back for years. The hospital collapsed. The press camped out at the entrance. The director was removed from his position hours after the complaint. A special investigation team was announced. They began to collect documents and called employees in to testify. Dr. Lucia, who until then had avoided appearing in public, came out in front of the cameras with a clean face, no makeup, and red eyes from crying so much. "We all failed, and I include myself because I accepted it. I kept quiet. I was an accomplice, even though I didn't want to be. But now we have to fix this." She cried live on TV, not out of shame, but out of pain, of realizing that she could have prevented all this, that she could have saved lives. And Marta stood there without shouting, without seeking revenge, with only the strength that only a mother can have. She looked straight at the camera and said, "I don't want justice just for my daughter. I want it for all those who didn't have time to scream, and for those who can still be saved." The whole city stopped. The country began to pay attention, and what was going to be just one case became the beginning of a change. The news came on the police car radio. Marta was in the back seat, returning from a preliminary hearing with the prosecutor, when she heard that the police had just confirmed the disappearance of Roman Ortega, a former doctor whose license had been revoked, and who was under investigation for involvement in death certificate fraud. She opened her eyes wide. That name again. That name that had entered her life like a blunt knife in the hospital. The atmosphere was tense. Nurses whispered in the hallways. Employees avoided contact. Investigators came and went with papers in their hands and serious faces. The next morning, confirmation arrived. A vacant lot behind an old abandoned factory, overgrown grass, trash, thrown bottles, and on the dirt floor, a stained white coat with the name embroidered on the chest. Dr. Roman Ortega. The police cordoned off the area. Experts, cameras, interviews. No trace of the man, no fingerprints, no witnesses, only the gown. Marta watched everything on television, sitting in the hard chair in the ICU. Next to her, Camila was still unconscious, with machines measuring her slightest signs. The TV in the corner of the room showed images of the lot and a reporter speaking live. The police are still investigating the whereabouts of Roman Ortega, who is being sought by the authorities. They consider him a key figure in the case, which includes alleged false reports and wrongful deaths. Marta couldn't take her eyes off the screen, but she no longer looked surprised. She had a determined expression, like someone who has seen too much. She got up, went to the ICU window, and stood there watching the drizzle fall on the city. "Running away doesn't erase what you did," she whispered. "But the truth is that no one can erase it now." Outside, the world went on, but now everyone knew who Roman Ortega was, and the silence he left behind was heavy, frightening, and full of questions that still awaited answers. Suddenly, the noise of the machines rose. The heart monitor sped up. The ICU lights flashed and then turned red. The medical team rushed in. The nurse shouted numbers. They increased the oxygen. "Mask! Hurry, hurry!" The pressure was dropping. Marta was there in the chair as always, only this time everything was out of control. She jumped up. "What's happening? Tell me something!" Her voice was desperate, almost breathless. Camila, who until then had shown slight improvements, was now breathing with difficulty. Her chest rose and fell quickly, then very slowly. Her fragile body seemed to be fading away little by little. as if the little life she had left wanted to leave. Lucia entered the room with her gown open, without saying anything. She went straight to the side of the bed, checked the data, and asked for medicine. She had her forehead furrowed, her hand trembling. "She's returning to a vegetative state," she said in a low voice, almost to herself. "It can't be. Not now." Marta approached with tears in her eyes. "What do you mean by that?" She was reacting. She heard my voice. She moved her finger. "I know. I saw it." But now Lucia paused and swallowed. Now she's not responding. It's as if everything has stopped again. She turned, took the 2 steps and leaned against the wall. She brought her hand to her face and cried. "It's my fault," she murmured. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have done more. I let this happen." Marta sank down next to the bed and hugged her daughter's body. She cried silently. All that could be heard was Camila's breathing and, from time to time, a single word. "My girl, my love, don't leave me, please." The sound of the machine stabilized, but now everything was slower, as if life were hanging by a thread. Marta remained there on her knees with her face pressed against her daughter's arm. Her voice was weak but firm. "You're not going to give up. Not now. You heard me, Camila, my girl. You're not going to give up. Not now. We've come so far. You pulled me out of the depths when I had already given up. Now it's my turn to pull you out, and I'm going to do it, even if it's with only one hand." Lucia turned her face away and cried silently. She knew that in that room, it was no longer medicine that was keeping Camila alive. It was love, and Marta was betting everything on that love until the very last second. Time seemed to stand still. Marta no longer counted the days, only the hours, each one heavy, silent, full of waiting. Camila remained there, motionless, her eyes closed, her face too calm for someone who was in the midst of a war inside. Her body breathed with assistance. The doctors came and went, writing things down. Things. Changed medications, but nothing changed. Lucia visited her every day, always in silence, carrying the guilt as if it were part of her uniform. And Marta was already part of that room. She slept in the chair, woke up with the alarms, talked to Camila every day, told her jokes, cried, smiled at her, even though there was no response. But that morning, something was different. The sun came in through the window from a new angle. The light fell on Camila's face. Marta got up slowly, adjusted the pillow, ran her hand over her daughter's forehead, and then stopped. Camila whispered. It had been almost imperceptible, but she swore she saw something move. She moved closer, touched her daughter's face with both hands, ran her fingers over her cheek again, and then her eyes. The right eyelid moved. "My God," she said softly. "My God, you're here." And her eyes opened slowly, as if waking from a very long sleep. First one, then the other. Marta was breathless, speechless, floored. Camila looked at her, her eyes still heavy, weak but conscious, alive. "Camila, it's me, Mom," she said, her voice trembling. "You're back." And then a tear fell from her daughter's eye. It wasn't a reflection. It wasn't a spasm. It was emotion. Camila was there. Marta fell to her knees, crying like never before, squeezing her daughter's hand, kissing her forehead, repeating her name as if she wanted to shout it to the whole world. Lucia ran into the room when she heard the noise. She stood in the doorway and saw the scene, the tears falling from Camila's face and her direct, meaningful gaze. She murmured, "She's back." The doctor leaned against the wall, covered her mouth with her hand, and let out in silence. Life had returned, not with noise, not with applause, but with a simple look, and in that look was everything: the presence, the feeling, the love. The commotion was so great that it could no longer be hidden. The press surrounded the hospital day and night. On social media, There was talk of nothing else. The complaints, the falsified reports, the names on that list. Everything was now in the hands of the prosecutor's office. They called Marta to testify. She handed over every piece of evidence with the calm of someone who had already been through hell and back. The recording of the threat, the anonymous envelope, the staff's accounts. Everything was accepted and investigated quickly and thoroughly. When the arrest warrant was issued, the city came to a standstill. Roman Ortega was found hiding in a rented house on the outskirts of town. He was trying to leave the country with false documents. The police stormed in and handcuffed him right there with the patrol car lights flashing with the whole street watching. 2 former hospital directors were also arrested that same morning, and with them came to light recordings of calls, internal records, and hidden emails where they spoke openly about speeding up beds, closing cases without wear and tear, and even betting. Yes, betting. Ortega was proud to predict people's deaths, to sign the paper ahead of time, and worst of all, he said that if he didn't like someone, he could shorten their suffering with a stamp. He made money from it, betting with other doctors, playing with lives. When that came out in the news, the country exploded with anger. They called him everything: murderer, monster, disgrace to medicine. But the name that stuck was another. People began to call him the devil in a white coat. The images of him in handcuffs, his face sweaty, being led away by the police, went around the world. Marta saw him from afar, not with joy, not with vengeance, but with silent pain, because she knew that behind that arrest, there were stories that would never return, families that would never hear apologies, children who would never wake up like Camila did. Lucia was also called to testify, and this time she told everything. She exposed the system and spoke from the heart without fear of being judged. The scandal became a national symbol. TV programs, reports, debates. The whole country discussed how this could have happened, how no one noticed, how they let a hospital become a silent cemetery. But now, the silence was over. Justice came late, but it came, and with it, a wound opened in many places, because that story was no longer just Marta's, it was everyone's. Time passed, but the marks remained, not only in memories, but on the body, on the skin, on the soul. On a quiet afternoon, Marta entered a small tattoo studio in the center of the city. It was simple, clean, smelling of fresh ink, with incense burning in a corner. The tattoo artist, a young man with a calm gaze, was already waiting for her. She showed him a carefully folded piece of paper. It was a hand-drawn picture of a small, delicate flower, with the name Camila on the stem, and next to it, a phrase written in shaky handwriting, as if the person who wrote it was crying. "Don't leave me. This is it," asked the kind man. Marta nodded. "Is this it? Here on the left arm, near the heart." She sat down in the chair, rolled up her sleeve, and closed her eyes for a second. The needle began its fine, repetitive sound, which seemed to echo her memories. She thought of everything: her daughter's first cry at birth, her little steps around the house, their silly fights, their long laughter, that night at the wake, the cold hand that later became warm, the finger that moved, the tear that fell, the miracle that happened. And she also thought of the mothers who lost their children, the fathers who couldn't say goodbye, the children who never had a voice. When the tattoo was ready, the tattoo artist cleaned it and applied a protective layer. Fell the miracle that happened. She also thought about the mothers who lost their children, the fathers who couldn't say goodbye, the children who never had a voice. When the tattoo was ready, the tattoo artist cleaned it carefully, put the plastic on, and looked at her with respect. It was beautiful, firm, and would last forever. Marta looked at herself in the mirror, touched it gently with her fingertips, and smiled sadly, but strongly. That's what it's for, so that a little bit, every time I forget, every time I think about giving up. It's to remember that my daughter asked me not to leave her, and I'm not going to leave her. She left the studio with her arms still burning, but her heart calmer. The street was still noisy, with people passing by and cars honking, but inside her, everything was silent. A firm silence of a promise fulfilled. And in that small gesture marked on her skin, Marta wrote what no justice in the world could say for her. She was never going to be silent again. It was one of those days with clear skies, but a cold wind. Camila was sitting in a wheelchair, her body still weak, her arms carefully supported, and her eyes more alive than ever. She still couldn't speak, but she already understood everything, every word, every gesture. The physical therapy room was simple, with support bars, colorful balls, and instrumental music playing softly in the background. Marta was there as always, with a bottle of water in her hand, watching her daughter's every move with the same attention as someone caring for a wounded flower. The physical therapist, a young, patient, and affectionate woman, gently encouraged her. "Let's try to lift your arm a little higher, Camila." Camila tried. The effort was noticeable. She had sweat on her forehead, her face was red, but she didn't complain. Marta was still there, clenching her hands as if it were a championship final. Suddenly, without warning, the physical therapist said something funny, something silly, perhaps a joke about how the elastic on the ball looked like a hair tie. No one expected anything, just a light-hearted moment. But that's when it happened. Camila moved her head a little to the side. Her eyes sought out her mother's, and then her lips opened slowly, almost with regret, but they smiled. Marta opened her eyes and froze. Camila said softly, her voice stuck in her chest, "My love, that was a smile, yes." Camila blinked as if to say yes without saying anything. The smile was still there, faint but full of life. Marta covered her mouth with her hands. Tears came before the cry. She knelt beside her daughter, hugged her legs, and put her face in her lap. "I have you, my love. I have you," she repeated, crying. "You're back. Really back." Camila, still voiceless, raised a hand with effort and touched her mother's hair. It was a soft, crooked caress, but it was hers. It was her daughter saying, "I'm here." The physical therapist turned her face away. She was crying too, there in that little corner of the hospital. The world stopped for a moment, because after so much pain, so much struggle, so much fear, a smile changed everything. A smile that said, "I've had won." The old notebook where Marta wrote everything down became a book. At first it was just for her, an outlet, a memory, a way to remember every detail. But every page she wrote seemed to scream louder, as if the story wasn't just hers, as if the pain belonged to many, and it did. The book was called The Girl They Buried Alive. It was published by a small publishing house, one of those that focuses on real human stories. At the launch, no one expected much, but after the first week, the book exploded. Mothers from all over the country began to write, to share their own stories, their doubts, their fears. Messages arrived every day. My daughter was also told it was sudden death. I was never able to see the body. My nephew's name is on the hospital list. What was once silence became a voice. Marta went on television programs, gave interviews, but always spoke in the same calm, firm, humane tone, without anger, with truth. I did not write this book to attack anyone. I wrote it to warn, to shout out, for those who didn't have a chance. My daughter's story became 1,000 stories, and none of them deserve to be forgotten. Lucia read everything in silence. She was embarrassed to go out in public, but deep down, she knew she had to do more. It was she who proposed it. What if we do something together? A place where no one has to shout alone. Marta thought for a second, and replied with tears in her eyes. "I accept, but it's not a project. It's a promise." That's how the NGO Despertar, Awakening, was born, in a small rented space, funded by donations. The two of them began to help families, explaining their rights, helping with studies and exams, providing guidance. They taught them to ask questions, to doubt, to not accept a quick diagnosis. On the door of the NGO, a phrase painted in blue: "Every life deserves a second chance." There, in that simple place with the smell of fresh coffee and new paper, Marta and Lucia gave meaning to everything they had experienced, because they knew that they couldn't change the past, but they could prevent it from repeating itself. It was a quiet Sunday. Marta was in the kitchen making tea when she heard Camila's slow footsteps in the hallway. Her daughter was walking better every day and no longer needed as much help. That day, there was something different in her gaze. "Mom, can I give you something?" Marta turned around, drying her hands with a cloth. "Of course, my love. What is it?" Camila handed her a folded sheet of paper, colored all over with crayons. It was a drawing made with colored pencils, with delicate details and strokes that were still a little shaky, but full of feeling. On the paper were the two of them holding hands with huge smiles, and in the background was an angel in a gown with soft wings and a stethoscope around her neck. In one corner, written in round letters, was "Dr. Lucia. She saved my heart." Marta couldn't hold back. Her eyes filled with tears. She instantly put her hand to her mouth and then hugged her daughter tightly with that motherly strength that holds the whole world in an embrace. "Oh my God, Camila, this is..." Her voice broke. "It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received in my life." Camila hugged her mother even tighter. It was hard at first, but in the end, she stayed with us. Marta felt her eyes still filled with tears. Days later, the two went to the hospital. It was the last day of her hospitalization. Camila was now going to be discharged. She was ready to go home for real, but first she had to say goodbye. Lucia was at the door of the ICU with her gown open and a calm expression. When she saw Camila, she smiled. "How beautiful you are, girl." Camila ran toward her with open arms and, without hesitation, hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Aunt Lucia." She stood still, then smiled back, a smile full of emotion. "Today," she said with a trembling voice, "today I was reborn." Marta stood there watching the scene with her soul at peace. In that hospital hallway, amid the smell of disinfectant and white walls, something immeasurable was born, a nameless affection, a bond of new beginnings, and a gratitude that even time will not erase. If it were your daughter, if in that coffin in the rain were someone you love, what would you do? Would you scream like Marta? Would you grab that cold hand, waiting for a sign? Would you have the courage to face everything and everyone to seek the truth? This story is not just Marta's. It belongs to every mother, every father, every person who has ever felt their heart stop for fear of losing the one they love. Now tell me, if it were your loved one in the coffin, would you fight like Marta? Write your answer below. I want to know what's in your heart. And don't forget to subscribe, because more soul-stirring stories await you.